All right. So as we transition, as we kind of finish out the course, one of the topics that I want to leave you with is this topic of freedom. And in a way, this has been a persistent theme throughout the entirety of our 6 weeks together, whether or not it was fully recognized or not. And what I mean by that, and why I think that, is even if we go back to Ishmael, right, and the main thing that Ishmael teaches, he claims, is captivity, right, of being captive. And it seems, even just kind of at the surface level, mention, that to be captive means to not be free, right? That if we are captive of someone, of something, right, it means that we are not totally free. And then as we kind of build on that, the questions as it relates to on bullshit, as it relates to on truth, as it relates to these questions that we've been asking about identity, right? Well, how free are we in potentially being ourselves, even if we don't really know what a self is? And so I want to finish out the course thinking about freedom. What is it? What is freedom? Does it exist? If so, how do we know? There's various conceptions of freedom, okay? And how is it used kind of when we speak and kind of conceptualize it? And of course, and especially in America, right? Freedom is often touted as, a penultimate value, right? Freedom worth defending. Freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of the right to protest, right? It's all wrapped up in the First Amendment. But what is freedom? And then moreover, I think really interestingly, right, the idea of restricting freedoms, right? So if we think about this in a political sense, right, we have such pride and such, we have such pride and we have such kind of interest and passion in defending freedom of religion or freedom of the press or freedom of assembly, whatever the case might be, but sometimes only to an extent, right? Freedom of the right to bear arms, but only to an extent, right? So is it really free if you restrict it? Right? Free of complete autonomy for one's body, for oneself, for one's kind of expression of who they are, only insofar to point X, right? So think about the kind of paradoxical nature of restricting freedoms. That's interesting, right? The idea that we, again, hold this value of freedom so passionately, so kind of proudly. But yet, there are a lot of people, a lot of politicians, a lot of actors within government, perhaps ourselves, right? Especially as it relates to beliefs, going back to the kind of first week of the class, where we're very, very passionate to defend beliefs rather than kind of that which maybe we claim to know or that which we claim to not know, right? And we can think about all those kind of hot button issues, right? You can think about abortion, you can think about climate change, global warming, you can think about gay marriage, gun rights, right? Immigration, right? All of these questions that are all very passionate, that a lot of people believe very passionate things about. But yet, often if we hold freedom to be such a powerful and meaningful value, but yet we want to restrict it, well, then that goes against the nature of freedom, doesn't it? Right? Right? We should care about the environment. We should care about, the cars that we drive. We should care about emissions. We should care about, all of these kind of questions as it relates to environmental degradation, right? And so, what we're going to do to encourage people to buy more fuel-efficient cars is to give them tax write-offs, right? So in that way, even though it seems like a good, beneficial thing, in a way that's restricting others' freedoms Because, well, maybe I want a tax write-off, but I don't want a fuel-efficient car. But also I should care about the environment. So what am I to do, right? Especially as it relates to freedom. That was a bit of a tangent. But still, I think the questions are important. I think the questions are meaningful here, right? Especially as we consider and as we think about the nature of freedom, right? What is freedom? What does it mean to be free? Does freedom exist? And if so, how do we know about freedom? Okay. Oxford defines freedom as the following: the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. Follow-up definition: the absence of or subjection to a foreign domination or despotic government. Further definition: the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. Or, final definition, the state of being physically unrestricted and able to move easily. Okay. So again, kind of like I think some really interesting questions here that, I mean, I try to operate within the bounds of society. I try to be kind. I try to, be lawful, to follow the laws. But do those laws restrict my freedom? If freedom is, again, the idea of the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint, well, a lot of my life is restrained, right? Even when I think that maybe it's not, and I could choose X, Y, or Z, well, there are certain parameters that probably encourage a certain path, encourage a certain movement as it relates to freedom. And so that's interesting, right? So how free are we? Are we free at all, right? Because just as, going back to Ishmael, right? Just as Ishmael suggests, I mean, I've got to wake up, I've got to go to work, I've got to pay the bills and all the rest, right? I am, responsible to and responsible for a multiplicity of things that I've agreed to, right? Of paying bills, of various other responsibilities, going to work, right? And to just give up on that, like, I mean, maybe that's it, right? Just to give up, or just maybe to, to say, you know what? I'm not going to pay those bills. I'm not going to go to work. That is the referential definition of freedom, right? Maybe that is the focus of recognizing that I don't have to pay bills, that I don't have to go to work, that I could choose otherwise. But yet if I choose otherwise, I'm going to be penalized for it. So I'm still constrained within the bounds of the responsibilities of the things that are telling me of what I have to do and how I have to do it. It gets confusing, right? So I want to start there in thinking about, well, what is freedom? Do we have it? Right? How do we understand it? Are we free at all? Especially when we all know, all of you taking this class, we all know that indeed we have restraints. And frankly, that if I was to go and break those restraints, if I was going to go do whatever I damn well please, right? Maybe I say I want a lot more money, so I'm going to go rob a bank, right? Well, maybe I'm free to do that, but I get caught, and then I get put in prison, right? Well, then that utterly takes away all of my freedom. And so because of that, I'm not going to choose to go rob a bank, even as desperate as my situation might be, for the fact that real, more freedom would be taken away. How free are we? Okay? Does freedom exist?